studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
I think you'll be happy in the future too.
Well, hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into all the things that have got you talking. I'll tell you what's got us talking just a second ago, that trailer. How good does that show look? Nigel Farage and Donald Trump. I know where I'm going to be at 7 o'clock, and that is watching that is for sure. Anyway, coming up on this show, Boris Johnson has held a press conference today, and as you'd expect, it was all about the boosters. Even the army are getting involved. I want to know, how are you feeling? Are you in the camp of feeling, yes, you can't wait to get your boosters? Is it everything going in the right direction? Or are you on the other side of the fence, feeling, hang on a second, is this all a bit much for a variant we don't even really know pretty much anything about right now? And Keir Starmer, he's shuffled his deck, hasn't he? What do you think to the new shadow cabinet? Do you reckon it's got what it takes to see Labour win the next election? And let me ask you about your house. Have you ever tried to do any extensions? If so, you'll know what a nightmare planning rules can be. What do you think then to the concept of street votes, where your neighbours basically come together instead to decide what you can and you can't do? We'll have that and more coming up, but first, the news headlines.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, I'm Simon Pusey, and these are your latest headlines. The Prime Minister says all adults will be offered a booster jab by the end of January and that Christmas parties should go ahead. Speaking at the latest COVID briefing, Boris Johnson confirmed the military will help the NHS with the rollout. In the last hour, MPs have voted in favour of new restrictions too, including face coverings in shops and on public transport in England. Travellers coming into the UK will also have to self-isolate until they receive a negative PCR result.
There'll be temporary vaccination centres popping up like Christmas trees, and we'll deploy at least 400 military personnel to assist the efforts of our NHS, alongside, of course, the fantastic Jabs army of volunteers.
Meanwhile, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, is urging everyone to get jabbed ahead of the Christmas festivities.
This is a national mission, and we all have a role to play. If we want to give ourselves the best chance of a Christmas with our loved ones, the best thing we can all do is step up, roll up our sleeves and get protected when the time comes.
So that's what the government have been saying, but there's been a mixed reaction from members of the public.
Most people aren't wearing masks correctly, and it just seems pointless as to why we're doing it. It just seems a knee-jerk reaction.
I think it's a good idea. They do protect other people and me as well. I think, I'm convinced that they do.
People are just, you look around, they're so complacent, but it can happen to anybody. We should all do it.
Well, I think it's a good thing. We've got to look after each other.
Meanwhile, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has updated Holyrood on the latest developments with the Omicron variant. She says overall infection levels have been falling over the last week, but still urged caution.
I very much hope that as we do learn more, our level of concern will diminish rather than increase. However, while hoping very much for the best, I think it is prudent at this stage to contemplate and prepare for something that is less positive than that.
Munster Rugby's plans to return home from South Africa have been derailed after a further 9 players tested positive for COVID. They'll now relocate to a quarantine hotel in Cape Town, where they'll join the first player who tested positive on Sunday. The remaining 38 players and staff have all returned negative results and continue to isolate in their rooms. French police have demolished a makeshift migrant camp near the Channel port of Dunkirk. Armed officers in protective suits pulled down tents and shelters along a disused railway line. The action comes as France opens the door to talks with the UK, saying it's writing a letter to Boris Johnson with proposals of how to tackle the migrant crisis. EasyJet has posted losses of more than £1 billion for the second consecutive year because of the pandemic. The airline is also seeing signs of demand decreasing after the discovery of the new COVID variant, but they say it's too soon to say what impact it will have on the industry. Despite the uncertainty, the company's still hopeful trading will return to pre-pandemic levels over its current year. Prince Charles acknowledged the appalling atrocity of slavery in Barbados as the country became a republic. During a ceremony to mark the occasion, the Prince of Wales said this was a new beginning for the nation. Its first ever president, Dame Sandra Mason, has now replaced the Queen as the head of state. Editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, Ingrid Seward, says the decision to part ways wasn't unanimous.
If people want to break and make themselves free from the crown and have a president, which they have now, they have Sandra Mason, who is a very, very popular. But the sad thing, I think, is it wasn't a vote by the people, it was a vote by the government. So the people of Barbados, they love the Queen. And it used to be called Little England. The island is very English in its way. But it wasn't a referendum like we had here. It was a decision by the government.
And the former Liverpool and Arsenal player Ray Kennedy has died at the age of 70. He won 3 European Cups and 5 league titles with Liverpool. The England international was also part of the Arsenal side that won a league and FA Cup double in 1971. Well, that's all your news for now. Let's get back to Dewbs & Co with Michelle.
Thanks for that, Simon. Well, joining me until 7 o'clock, my panel, Alan Miller, who's the co-founder of campaign group Open for All, Joanne Nadler, political commentator and author, Miata Fanbulla. Sorry, I'm mixing the two. You're the political commentator and the author. And Miata Fanbulla is the chief executive of the new Economics Foundation. Good evening to all of you. You're so talented. You've all got so many strings to your bows. What can I say? You know the drill as well about this programme, don't you? It's not just about us. It is also about you. I want to know what you are thinking tonight on all of our topics. And anything else, quite frankly, what's on your mind? Is there anything that you're talking about that you think we should be? You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. But let's get into the first story, shall we? Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the aim right now is to offer booster jabs to all adults by the end of January. Let's have a listen.
I'm pleased to say, so whenever your turn comes, get your booster and ask your friends and your family to do the same. It's time for another great British vaccination effort.
Well, everyone's getting involved, even the army. They're going to be helping administer vaccines at 1,500 community pharmacy sites. You're going to have everything, extra hospital hubs. Apparently, these hubs are going to be popping up like Christmas trees, according to Boris Johnson. And Sajid Javid has also got involved, told people basically to get their sleeves rolled up and get their vaccine. Let's have a listen to that.
If we want to give ourselves the best chance of a Christmas with our loved ones, the best thing we can all do is step up, roll up our sleeves and get protected when the time comes.
Let's have a look, shall we? Just remind ourselves about some of these measures that have come in place today. Face masks are compulsory in shops and on public transport and some other places. Secondary school pupils have been advised to wear masks in corridors. Close contacts of the Omicron cases basically must self-isolate for 10 days. And returning travellers must take the PCR tests and self-isolate until negative results. Rules are apparently going to be reviewed in about 3 weeks' time. Alan Miller, let me start with you. Your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting in the questions that the Prime Minister, and the questions often by the media are, why aren't you going far enough? I didn't hear anyone saying, what, isn't mask wearing somewhat of a pantomime at this point? But one of the things that's interesting is he said we need to be balanced and proportionate, and he said it 3 times at least. And yet these reactions to something that in South Africa was said that the doctor who discovered it and raised notice said that they thought it was mild symptoms, seems to be a very big knee-jerk reaction. At the same time, somewhat of a pantomime to impose masks, but also damaging to children. We've seen kids undergo so many interruptions and the impact on them when we know the risk to children is very minimal. And I think we now need to contextualise this. This is 20 months down the road. And it's fine if the government want to advocate a strong booster campaign. And it's certainly the case that, you know, in the initial discussion, 15 million jabs to freedom, the idea of the elderly and the vulnerable preventing severe illnesses and deaths, very good thing. It seems to me, though, that this discussion about this so-called new variant, last week some other people were talking about another one, is almost being instrumentalised, is being used quite a lot, in the same way that some of the discussions around vaccine passports were, to really drive a discussion on the base of fear of this thing. Now, another thing that's come out of South Africa is they think that the vaccines currently deal with it. But you've got this strange thing that people are getting very confused now, because on the one hand, they're saying we're not sure if the vaccine deals with it. But what we're saying to you to do is to go and get a vaccine and get a booster and in 3 months' time. And the other thing that was really interesting was that they kept referring to the JCVI this time.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So they keep referring to the JCVI as the JCVI recommended, and yet when it came to children being vaccinated and the JCVI did not recommend that, they thought, well, we don't like that piece of advice, we don't like that bit of science, so we're going to go and get the CMOs.
But JCVI, what JCVI said about things like mass rollouts to healthy kids, 12 to 15, they said that on health grounds alone, they didn't feel essentially that it was worth doing a mass rollout, so they deferred. So the JCVI basically deferred the government and said you should look at the CMOs and take a broader perspective. Miata, what's your thoughts on all this?
Well, look, I think we just don't know enough about this variant. So I think actually the government's right to be cautious. I think the two things...
Cautious? They're not cautious. They're hugely optimistic and gung-ho. There's no caution when it comes to the boosters, is there?
Well, I think they're cautious about the risk of this variant, which is why they're acting quickly. And I think the two things we've learned is we should be cautious about this, particularly when we don't know, and we should act quickly. And I think on both those fronts, they are right. I think the booster programme, why not? My big issue with this is we can do a lot to try to contain the virus domestically, and we should do everything we can. I don't have an issue with face masks. I think it's a level of protection. Do it. But my big issue is that if you just do things at home, but you don't confront the fact that actually the rest of the world, the pandemic is still raging. In the rest of the world, we are seeing a really slow pace of vaccination. So, you know, here, nearly 70% of the population is vaccinated. You look across Africa, it's 7%. Low-income countries, it's 5%. And for me, it's half a strategy if we do not vaccinate the rest of the world, because there will always be the risk of these variants coming to threaten whatever progress we've made.
Well,
and until we deal with that...
You say about protecting things domestically. I mean, I think trying to contain this thing, it's like trying to catch rain in a colander. Because already, if you look across the UK, you've got Glasgow, Liverpool, London, North Norfolk, Nottingham, that's already reported cases of Omicron. So it's already spreading.
It is spreading, and what they're trying to do is to cramp down on it. They're trying to put in place measures that ensures that we don't see greater transmission, and I think that's all fair enough. But there will be variants. They will come. They will upset things until we get the entire world vaccinated, and that's the bit that I think we are getting wrong. And until we fix that, this pandemic is not going to go away.
So what are you saying then? Pause UK rollouts and send the vaccines overseas?
I think we should be sending excess vaccines and we should be sharing them with other countries. I think the second thing we should be doing is funding a mass global vaccination programme, and we're not doing that. And then the third thing we should be doing is waiving patents on vaccination, on vaccines and other COVID technologies, which means you can produce them en masse and you can distribute them en masse in other parts of the world. The pandemic is not over until it's over globally. We will always be at risk. We'll always have this in and out until we fix that part of the problem.
Margaret's been in touch saying, I'm with the government on this. Better to be safe than sorry until we've found out more about this new variant. But Susan says, Michelle, I've had enough now of all of these variants. She feels this is now coming across as control, sending us all around the bend, she says. Joanne, is it sending you around the bend?
Well, I think the government is in a bit of a political bind, and to a certain extent they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. I'm sceptical about the use of face masks unless we use the medicalised face masks and unless we change them regularly. So I think some of this, whilst I wouldn't use the word pantomime, I'm in sympathy with Alan's point that there's quite a lot of this that looks as though it's sort of superficial. And I'm also very sympathetic with what Miata's saying about the vaccinations abroad. It seems to me that we're now moving to a position where we're pushing this booster vaccine here into younger and younger people, into people who really aren't at any particular risk from this, whilst we're leaving vulnerable people abroad who are at risk. And as any virologist could have told you even before we've had to deal with this particular pandemic, you can't really contain a pandemic in one country. Ultimately, it will spread. I mean, there are measures, and we've seen these taken over the last year to try and contain them, but ultimately these things do spread. So I think that the emphasis here seems to me to be overly cautious. We've replaced the hands-face space with precautionary and proportionate. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue in quite the same way, but that's what we're going to be hearing a great deal of. And I think it's right to ask, is it proportionate?
Well,
it's
Alan,
certainly precautionary, but is it proportionate?
I mean, Alan, you've set up something called the Together. You're quite against the whole kind of mandates and things like that. But let me ask you this. I mean, I've got this list here of where... certainly in England, you should be wearing a face covering. The list is quite extensive, I've got to be honest. Shops and supermarkets, auction houses, post office, pharmacies, vets, public transport, takeaways without space for consumption of food and drink, retail galleries, and so it goes on. Why are pubs? No?
It shouldn't be. I don't think it should be in any of these places. I think that there's very, very little evidence for any of the efficacy of mask wearing.
But why aren't pubs on this list?
Well, I don't know why the government... If I could answer you the answers to why the government is making the decisions it is on this, but it constantly confound me. What I will say is this. Firstly, no one's been talking about immunity again, and the amount of people that about the fact that people have caught COVID and they've now got a much higher immunity in often cases, as many research projects have shown, than necessarily vaccination. And this kind of knee-jerk reaction to look like you're doing something must be done. What actually Chris Whitty said was, look, calm down, we're actually OK. He'd actually said to us that we need to live with this like the flu. All of a sudden, a few examples of some cases, not necessarily bad illnesses, certainly not deaths, in a few different places around the world and a few here. And we're imposing impositions after 20 months down the road when we're meant to be getting back to normal. The damage that we're doing when we keep doing this in terms of people wanting to get on with life, the threats that are there to business, and alongside things like mandatory vaccines, which have already lost 60,000 people their jobs in care homes, another 100,000 people at risk of it. And you just kind of think, well, it's 20 months down the road. They say it's just 3 weeks now. Well, we've heard that before. We need to get on. We need normality back. We don't need this hanging over us, particularly when Scotland, Wales and Ireland already have vaccine passports and are actually arguing for more. This whole kind of idea that the way we resolve for things, the precautionary principle, the thing we better do is get back to normal. Otherwise, no one's going to recognise what it's like.
I'm very sympathetic with Alan, actually, except that I think we've got to wait and see what the government really is intending to do with this, because it could be that they're softening us up for much tougher restrictions, or it could be that they're, as you suggested earlier, kind of trying to capitalise on the new variant to push the booster programme. Now, I would suggest that people should be looking to get more antibody testing to see if they need the boosters at the point in which they're being offered. But I haven't, I say that just as kind of from the point of view of a common sense comment rather than having any expertise in this.
Yeah, so, I mean, I agree that in the end we're going to have to live with this thing because it's going to be with us for a while. I think part of how we do that is that we build in minimum levels of protections. And I think you look across the countries that have dealt with SARS, actually face wearing...
What does the minimum level of protection mean?
Wearing a face mask in public transport is something that if you go to Southeast Asia, it's just a norm, because actually they've learnt that the way in which you manage transmission is by having that level of protection.
So you want face masks forever?
Well, I think that as long as this thing is there and it hasn't mutated to the point that it doesn't really have an impact on people, then actually, yeah, we should have minimum levels of protection.
Oh, goodness me. Face masks forever, says Miata. I want to headbutt the table at that suggestion, I can tell you. But what do you think? Lots of you are getting in touch. And I've got to say, well, this topic seems to split you down the middle. Rosalia, I think that's how you say your name, says, I've had my booster jab. No different than having my flu booster every year. Every little helps, as the saying goes. We need, basically what she's saying is we should get on and do this. Mark, however, says, I refuse to wear a mask and I will not be getting any more jabs. So like I said, really is dividing you down the middle at the moment. But continue getting in touch with me. Let me know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Going to take a very quick break. When we come back, I'll be talking about the Labour Party. Did you see the reshuffle that they did? If you did, he was one step ahead of Angela Rayner, who didn't seem to know quite what was going on. Anyway, I wonder your thoughts on this. Do you reckon that this is the winning team? It's going to win the Labour at the next election or not? We'll have that and more after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. It's been much milder today, but colder air is going to return. Certainly feeling cold in the winds tomorrow. A bit brighter with some sunshine, but there will be showers, and those showers in places likely to turn wintry. This area of low pressure is developing, and as it heads into the North Sea, really producing some strong winds across the coast of northeast England again. And after Storm Arwen hits at the weekend, that is not good news for this part of the world. As well as the winds picking up, there's going to be plenty of rain around. That rain turning heavy at the moment across Scotland. A band of rain will whiz across England and Wales this evening, followed by some very lively showers when the winds will suddenly just whip up. So you may get woken up by the gusty winds tonight. Temperatures dropping down, but generally staying a few degrees above freezing, thanks mostly to the strength of the wind. That wind will be very lively then along some North Sea coasts in the morning, providing plenty of showers here as well. Some of those could be of hail, rain showers for Wales, southwest England, and the showers turning more and more wintry over northern Scotland as the day goes on. But there will be sunny spells, and there's going to be a cold feel to the day. Temperatures back to single figures, and add on that wind, it feels even colder. Certainly getting pretty cold on Wednesday evening, with further snow likely over northern Scotland, and then the potential through tomorrow evening for a mixture of rain, sleet and some snow to push south over southwest Scotland, northwest England into parts of Wales. So in this zone you may wake up to a covering on Thursday morning. The potential for things to turn icy as well, because as the winds ease, temperatures will drop further. So it's a cold start to Thursday. Could be some ice around and still some snow mixed in as this weather system trickles south across Wales into southwest England on Thursday morning. So again, may wake up to a covering in places here. Generally a fine sunny day on Thursday, but it will be cold, but those winds at least will be a little bit lighter.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
On Brazier at 8, the story mainstream media is ignoring as Iraq flies its nationals home from Belarus. Has Poland won its war on illegal migration? And what does that mean for policymakers in Britain? Also, his name is mud in some of our workers' schools and universities. but on what would have been the birthday of Sir Winston Churchill, we honour the life of our greatest Briton. And why aren't prices at the petrol pumps falling this time? After record-breaking highs, the big fuel companies are refusing to hand on cuts in the cost of oil. That's Brazier from 8.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. We're still going on about the vaccine during the break. I tell you, so much to say. I've got so many questions. I was tweeting some of my questions out earlier on, and I ran out of time because I had to prepare to talk to you lovely people instead. Anyway, Gary has been in touch. Gary from Nottingham, he says, the government are damned if they do and they're damned if they don't, but personally, he would prefer that they don't. Anyway, Labour, have you seen that they've had a reshuffle? I mentioned earlier that Angela Rayner seemed to have not been so familiar with that. Let's have a little listen to that.
Yes, the reshuffle. How could I forget? Look, I don't know the details of any reshuffle. I've been concentrating on the job that I'm doing at hand, and I think that's really important.
Well, luckily for Angela Rayner, we know details of the reshuffle. Do you reckon, should I say, that they've assembled a team that is worthy, that will win the election? Sir Keir Starmer has appointed Yvette Cooper to shadow Home Secretary. David Lammy was promoted to shadow Foreign Secretary. And Lisa Nandy going toe-to-toe with Michael Gove on the levelling up side of things. As I mentioned, it did get a bit of feedback, shall we say, a bit of controversy because of that Angela Rayner clip that I mentioned there. But Joanna, I wonder, from your perspective, I mean, Labour got absolutely battered in the last election, didn't they, back in 2019? If it wasn't for the likes of the Brexit Party, I would suggest that they would have even got a further battering than they did. Do you reckon this team they've got what it takes? Is this what people want to see? Is this what's going to get them the voters out of the next election?
Well, I think they've got a much better chance with this team. I think it's a much more effective front bench, and I think it shows that Keir Starmer is actually capable of being really quite brutal in a way.
What was your highs and lows? What did you like and what didn't you like?
Well, I think that Yvette Cooper is very capable of giving Priti Patel a run for her money, and you know, many people would consider her to be sort of intellectually rather more superior to the Home Secretary. And David Lammy, I think, is a really interesting appointment. He's one of the more sort of outspoken members of the front bench, and I think against Liz Truss, that will be intriguing because David Lammy is quite happy to sort of enter into the culture wars, as is Liz Truss. I think in many ways, what Labour needs to do is take the advice, though they will, not want to do this, but take the advice from Tony Blair this week that they really need to exit the culture wars and concentrate on the day-to-day problems that people have. And this front bench, I think, gives them a much better chance of doing that if Keir Starmer's determined to make that move and lead from the top.
What do you think, Mata?
So I think one of the criticisms of Labour is that they haven't had that much traction in terms of actually opposing the government, getting their voices heard, getting out there so people know what they're opposing and what they'd stand for. So, I think they have some experienced people. They've got some heavy hitters there that can actually hold a voice and get their voices heard, which I think is a positive. But in the end, that election will be won because they have an offer to the country.
Yeah.
They have a prospectus that is different to the government's prospectus that they can convince people will make their lives better. So I think a team helps, but until they get that definition, what are you about? You don't win elections just by not being the other guy or standing against the other guy. They've got to stand for something. They've got to say, we understand the problems that people face, and here is our plan to make your lives better.
But some people would say that they do stand for something already. Joanne pointed out what Blair was saying. So when I think of the Labour Party at the moment, I think that they're focusing, dabbling around in all the wrong places, like saying that you can't say that a woman's got a cervix or only a woman's got a cervix or whatever it is, getting themselves involved in those kind of conversations, I would find quite a turn-off, I think.
So I think they need to focus on bread and butter issue. The Labour Party is the party of working people. The Labour Party is the party that's, supposed to be there at great points where we make the country better. And I think they need to talk to that history and that legacy. And if you take it back to living standards, which, by the way, will be the #1 issue, because it would have been 15 years in which living standards have not shifted in this country, all under a Conservative government. They need to take it to that bread and butter issue. How do we make your lives better? How do we make your communities better? How do we ensure you can get on that, you can afford a home? How do we make sure that your health system is fit for purpose? Take it to that, have something to sell, have a clear message, have some really, really credible policies, and perhaps we have an election that's worth watching.
What do you reckon, Alan?
I think they should be talking to you a little bit more. I think let's take ourselves on a history lesson. Back in the day, when the first Keir had the International Labour Organisation, the Labour Party was created, and there was a big discussion in Britain, reform or revolution, and the Labour Party was there for working people, hence the name was giving it away. Labour has no longer got any of that relationship with ordinary people, in my view. I think actually, like many in politics, like the government, Labour is actually quite contemptuous of ordinary people. It's disdainful. I think we have a crisis at the level of politicians that they often think that the public are something to be scared of, or they're going to be turned into something really nasty. And we've got a problem. Like, we see the old carcasses of political parties, I think, and in a way, I think we need some new things. But the idea that they should not involve themselves in the cultural wars. The problem is, because they don't have a rudder and an orientation around ordinary people, in my view, they are obsessed with these issues. They're obsessed with the sort of things that you have in campuses and the culture wars. And they genuinely, I think there's at the level of their intellectual position, if you could call it that, that's something that obsesses them. And I think that there's a big chasm and gap between ordinary people and what they want in their life on a daily basis and those discussions. And I think as it happens, ironically, just like the government at the moment, it came in as a consequence of what we saw with Brexit, but the Conservatives are no longer Conservative either. And so in some ways, I think there's an enormous opportunity to talk about some of the things you're talking about the things that people face, the issue of housing, the issue of growth and development, the kind of wages that people... But there's a real gap. And it certainly isn't going to be Tony Blair that fixes that. And they've had their own issues with the previous leader. And I think reshuffle is not something that's going to resolve it. You need to thoroughly rethink it and transform yourselves. And I'm not sure that can happen within the Labour Party. I'd actually advocate that ordinary people assert themselves as much as possible and let their MPs, both Labour and Tory, hear. That's why we're actually with the togetherdeclaration.org. We're actually organising a week next week.
Nice little cheeky plug there.
Well, we are. Next week, we're organising something. The reason I say this is because I think that people make history and ordinary people do it. And whether it's the Labour Party or Tory Party, anything that we've seen from civil rights to the women's vote, it's always been ordinary people that have demanded that. And we're saying to people to come out next week and actually make sure your MPs hear your views on certain things. One of them is vaccine passports. but because I actually think that people have forgotten that it's ordinary people that shape the world, and we should all put pressure on our elected representatives to let them know what we think and hear and make a difference. And it's gone the wrong way around. It's all top-down now, and it's a very contemptuous view. On the one hand, we've had the government sort of telling us all the time, contemptuously, not engaging, not convincing hearts and minds, but nudging and demanding. And on the other hand, a so-called opposition that's saying, go further.
Yes, I think that's been the weakness for the opposition, hasn't it? Is that it's been very quick to condemn the government on all fronts, really, but very slow to come up with an alternative vision. Now, I'm very doubtful as to whether they can do that, but I just think that this particular reshuffle puts them in a slightly stronger position than they were before. And I think, somebody like Will Streeting, who's moved to health, and Lisa Nandy, I think they're more willing to kind of engage with these, as you said, the bread and butter issues, and perhaps they've got potentially more appeal to the red wall seats as well.
What do you say about red wall, Miata? I'd be interested in your view on this, because I was about to ask you guys how relevant, if at all, you felt that the whole Brexit thing was. And just before I started to form through that question, I've noticed the emails and the tweets that are flying in. And it's actually surprised me how many of you guys, the viewers, are getting in touch on Twitter and on emails talking specifically about Brexit, saying that you won't forget some of the goings-on, obviously trying to overturn the election result is what I'm referring to, but that you won't forget the Brexit thing. So I would ask the viewers as well, those of you that have got in touch with me, and there are many of you that have got in touch tonight saying that you'll never forget the Brexit thing, the red wall won't forget. Is there nothing at all that, I don't know, say like the Labour Party could do that would make you move on from that? Or is there anything that this current government could do that would be so bad that would make you forgive them for that? So get in touch with me and just answer that question as well, if you wouldn't mind. But Miata, what's your thoughts in terms of that whole Brexit thing and how that would play out going forward?
So, I mean, I think in the end, Brexit was always about making people's lives better. Like, that was the pitch. Yes, it was a bit about sovereignty, but it was to make people's lives better. And if we get to the end of this parliament, if we get 5 years hence and people's lives aren't better, then I think that does open up the whole thing. Like, what is the point of a political project that doesn't help us or our children? And for me, that is the key issue. And I think the big risk for the government is that it is messing Brexit up.
Yeah,
there was
an opportunity that seems to have been wasted in many ways. Now, people voted for Brexit for all sorts of reasons, and I was certainly one of those who felt that there was the opportunity for us to be the sort of Singapore off the edge of Europe. But that didn't. That wasn't necessarily the appeal to most people. But nevertheless, that capacity for us to have a sort of dynamic, competitive economy, to set our own labour regulations and labour rules and bring in or not people as we needed them to work. I mean, all of those things seem to me to be very essential for the new Britain the outgoing Britain that Boris Johnson was talking about before the pandemic. Now, whether he just didn't have the intellectual sort of drive to push that through, or whether he's just been completely blindsided by the pandemic and then the huge amount of money that's had to be spent on that. But the end result is much the same, that very sadly, it seems like a lot of the potential advantages that Brexit has given us could be squandered.
Yeah, Clive, for example, has just emailed in saying, I've voted Labour for 47 years until they tried to ignore the biggest vote ever. He goes on to say, I will never vote for this bunch of clowns. This is Clive's word, not mine. He says, I will never vote for this bunch of clowns again. And Clive goes on to say, it's also that view is shared by many, he says, of his friends and former Labour voters. Let me know, what could Labour do? Clive and people like Clive, what could they do? Anything at all to try and swing you and get you back? Let me know your thoughts. Going to take a quick break now. When we come back, have you ever tried to extend your home? If you have, as I mentioned earlier, the planning rules can be an absolute nightmare. What then would you think instead to your neighbours coming together and having a bit of a mini referendum to decide whether or not you should be able to do your extension? What do you reckon to that one? We'll be having that and more after the break, so don't go away.
I think you'll be happy in the future, too.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, we hear all the time, don't we, about we don't have enough houses, we've got a housing shortage, a housing crisis, whatever the sentence is. It's all the time we're getting bombarded with these messages. So what do we do about it then? Obviously, we need to build things, but also we need to perhaps extend things that we've already got, look at how our neighbourhoods are kind of shaping up. What do they look like? What do they feel like? Well, under new rules that have been announced by the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, homeowners will be able now to band together with their neighbours to hold a referendum on adding extensions to their properties. Under the plans, 20% of residents or 10 homeowners could apply to their local council to hold a referendum on a design code for their street. I wonder, am I that kind of resident that would sit there and talk to my neighbours and say, right, guys, let's band together and submit a design code for the neighbourhood? I'm not really sure that that's kind of in my DNA, but for many it is. Is this a good idea, Miata?
I think it might be a bit of a gimmick, to be quite honest with you, I have to say. So, I mean, partly extensions are now much easier through the planning system. I think the question of, people being worried about new buildings because they worry it's going to change the look and feel of their place or deteriorate the look and feel of their place is a genuine thing. I think the truth is, for many people who are incredibly busy, incredibly pressurised, the idea that they're going to suddenly club together to decide they're going to have a referendum and then go through that, I don't know, feels quite distant from where people are. And for me, the core question for the government is, how do you solve the housing crisis? And yes, it is about building good quality homes, but it's about building a lot more homes. And it feels like they're tinkering when they should be grappling with the kind of core issue.
Yeah, and I've got to say, Joanne, as well, maybe this is a cynic in me, because I sit there and I think, people, you've got a lot of envy going on in the world, I think. And if someone's neighbour, if someone's got an opportunity, I don't know, to build a little studio, whatever, in their back garden or something like that, a studio flat in their back garden, I wouldn't put it past neighbours, some neighbours, to sit there and go, hang on just a second. He's going to make 100 grand or whatever it is out of his back garden. Why should he be allowed to do that? And I'm not sure how I would. Maybe this is just me being a bit cynical.
I think I very much agree with Miata about this. I do think that this is a rather marginal suggestion. It may very well have a particular role in particular places. My understanding of it is that in certain streets, it would be applicable where a number of residents want to make a change and they're trying to pull together a kind of unified approach to that, so you don't end up, as you do in particularly a lot of streets in London, with all sorts of different carbuncles stuck on the side of houses and none of them really match. But
carbuncle, what a great word. I've not heard the word carbuncle for ages. Great word, John. Well done.
I've managed to pull that out of my lexicon. Let's see what else I've got. But I think, that what this is in danger of doing, and it slightly goes to your point, is that whilst the planning process, if you want to extend your house or whatever, can be quite complicated, it at least serves the function that the local authority acts as a sort of mediator between yourself and your neighbours. So if there is a dispute, there's a third party involved, and you haven't got to kind of flesh it out mano a mano over the fence, as it were. So I think it's a potentially interesting idea, but it's really got nothing at all to do with the point that Miata was making about the wider housing problem, and it's got nothing at all to do with the fact that the government has shelved the the changes in planning for proper big developments that were mooted under Theresa May. And that's a much bigger, much more controversial thing, and we've yet to see what's going to come in place of those.
Alan?
Yeah, well, I think that the idea of getting referendums locally, I'm all for local people doing things together, and they can obviously make decisions, and we all have autonomy and brains, but there's also a time factor and a range of other issues. Seems like it's outsourcing, like the government likes to outsource all sorts of things, the recent governments, whether it's the control of the economy, or a range of other issues. I think that the big question, though, is that, you have to ask yourself why so many young people and others can't afford and get flats and houses. And we need 5 million new houses in Britain. And basically, we need a robust house building campaign that makes them affordable and makes them plentiful. I've been to China several times, and I'm always amazed that every time I've been to Beijing, the city changes again and again and again. You can say lots of things about China, but that ambition, that drive to develop that used to be, we'd seen it in America as well, and we used to have it here much more, that kind of Victorian spirit, that aspiration to transform and develop. It's gone away, and some people are nervous about the political ramifications because people obviously have a lot of their investment tied up in housing, but housing shouldn't really be about investment. We should have investment in the economy and research and development and better wages, and houses should be places to live in. Instead, we've got this situation, they're treated like fine art. A few people can talk about extensions, and that's nice, and lots of young people can't afford them, and lots of people are in inadequate housing, and we need a robust housing campaign, and I would suggest that the government focus its attention on that rather than trying to outsource things.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are still getting in touch, and I have to say the two things that seem to be dominating people's view on Labour is predominantly, I would say, the Brexit situation, but also what's going on in terms of the crossings, open borders, how much border control Labour would want to have. That seems to be a big issue. You don't seem to trust them on that issue. Anthony has been in contact saying Alan Miller talks about ordinary people shaping the election of outcomes. However, he says, whilst we've got the first past the post system, it will always pretty much be dominated by the bigger parties. And I mean, we've seen that at a couple of previous elections. So I have to agree with you on that, Anthony. Maybe it might be time for a referendum, another one, dare I suggest, on whether or not we should have something like proportional representation. Susie has got in touch saying, Michelle, I would never vote for the Tories again due to their lack of effort on the illegal channel crossings. But then she goes on to say, in fact, I would never vote for Labour either. In fact, she says, I may never vote again. That would be a shame, Susie, because I do think that you should try and use your vote wherever you can, even if it's just to send a message in some instances. Lots of you, though, I have to say, coming and the same sentiment coming over time and time again in the emails just about the EU. And it surprised me, I've got to say, that that's still such a big sentiment. I think that might surprise a few other people as well. Lots of you getting in touch still about the whole vaccine thing, the whole booster thing. One of the conversations we had in the break, which I found quite interesting, was a question that I was asking, and I posed it on Twitter, actually. And of course, I've been abused for being a so-called anti-vaxxer for daring to even ask this question, but I think it's a valid question nonetheless. And if I was asking Boris Johnson questions at a press conference like he held today, there's a few key things that I would want to know. And I would want to know things like, you're pushing people to have repeat vaccines. Where is your support programme for anyone that's unfortunate enough to have experienced a side effect from the vaccines? What are you doing to help those people? Because if you want us all to have a vaccine, then any one of us however rare it could be affected by that. So I would want some support there. And I would want you to focus more on things like natural immunity. Anyway, let's move on. Your dream job, do you know what that is? I've got mine, obviously, sitting on GB News talking to these lovely people and talking to you. But what about you? What is your dream job? Apparently, there's been a survey conducted. And get this, the dream would be a private... when you ask them, I was just about to say a private jet, but that's not a job, is it? A private jet is just a thing. Most workers apparently are looking for very simple things, more down-to-earth benefits, apparently, like a tidy workspace, 3 cups of tea, and a comfy chair. That's quite simple, isn't it? Apparently, you'd want to work 26 hours a week, you'd want to earn £44,000, you'd want to have regular pay rises, and a boss that you could have a pint with. What do you reckon to that, Mayata?
Yeah, so look, it doesn't surprise me, actually, because they're just some cool bread and butter things that people want in order to make their working life quite good. I like the 4-day week, so that's something that my organisation has been campaigning for a long time. And I think the thing that kind of gives me hope is...
Do you offer it, your organisation?
We do, actually, but our policy is like a 4-day week on equal pay, and that's harder to achieve, and we're just actually working through how you do that at the moment. But the reason why you would do it is, actually, if people are working less, but they're productive when they're working, they're not so burnt out, they're not so tired, they can balance work and life, you get huge benefits back to the organisation. It's good for productivity, so there are upsides. But all of this feels quite attainable. And just imagine if we were to focus on how we achieve that handful of things that could massively change people's working life. Huge benefits to companies, to the individual, to society, and none of it is pie in the sky. So I think it's quite hopeful.
Yeah, your dream job, Joanne, what do you reckon?
I loved this story. I just think it goes to the good common sense of the British people. I mean, none of this business about open plan offices, bean bags, football tables, all the kind of garbage I've seen in offices over the last few years, which were kind of rolled out as being some fantastic advantage to work in that particular company, even though you were never allowed to leave the office and you weren't allowed to have a private life, and you were probably going to end up in your late 30s as a woman without any children. So I just think this is just fantastic. Nobody's asking for, unconscious bias training. Nobody's asking for more power for human resources. This, it completely makes sense, these kind of priorities, and why wouldn't they? Because actually it allows you to have a work-life balance.
Alan, have you got your dream job?
I'd love to have a regular show on here, Michelle. That's my. Well, I'm not sure if it's a dream job. I'm actually lucky enough to be engaged in my dream work at the moment, which is campaigning to challenge things like vaccine passports and impositions at the moment with togetherdeclaration.org. I actually really genuinely mean that, and engaging with the public to say to them that I think they should have their voices heard. But one thing to say about this, in Britain for many years, several decades, we've had a sluggish economy. I remember growing up and looking at Americans, seeing how people on the car factory work floor, they were getting like $25, $30 an hour, and we were looking at them and they've got these houses, they've got this great aspirational lifestyle, and we thought we could be like that. And the whole aspiration were for people to get better wages, and as things improve, that would be transformed. Now, we've had sluggish wages for a long time, and we've had very difficult working conditions, and actually, our cost of living in Britain compared to other European nations is very problematic. So high cost of living to what we get. And I think you can ask questions in a certain way with some of these polls, as we've seen with a lot of polls recently, I should add. And you get a certain kind of answer. But of course, some people would like some of these things. I think it's partly about teamwork, partly about feeling like you're actually making a difference and that you're valued. But actually, one of the things that we've forgotten is the idea that we should be consistently transforming ourselves, both at the level of business and industry and creativity and society, and we should be getting paid more. The aspiration, right, for men and women to be able to work and all that was a good one. But what we've often found now in this situation is both, if you happen to be a man and a woman together and you have kids, is that you're both working really, really hard and not sometimes earning enough money for the house like that. So, it begs the question, like, why it is the case that we've got this sluggish situation. I think we should have a much more robust economy and dynamic investment. And that is something that I think right now, when we're talking about impositions 20 months down the road, the government should really be focused on, because that affects our health and it affects our society generally in the forward going.
Well, there you go. You're getting in touch with me as well and telling me about your dream jobs. Interesting. George said, mine was to be a fireman and I achieved it at 18, he says. and I was an electrician. Ever since. Anything's possible, says George. It is indeed. It certainly is indeed. Well, that's pretty much all we have got time for. I have got an email that really made me laugh, and I'm not making this up, I promise. Colin has got in touch and says, Alan Miller looks so much like a good-looking Alan Sugar. Think about what you will. What a nice note to end the programme on there. Thanks for that, Colin. I'm sure Alan is thrilled by that compliment. Joanne, Alan and Miata, thank you very much for your company. And of course, thank you for yours. I will be back tomorrow at the same time, 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock. So you have yourselves an incredible evening until then. And I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. It's been much milder today, but colder air is going to return. Certainly feeling cold in the winds tomorrow. A bit brighter with some sunshine, but there will be showers, and those showers in places likely to turn wintry. This area of low pressure is developing, and as it heads into the North Sea, really producing some strong winds across the coast of northeast England again. And after Storm Arwen hits at the weekend, that is not good news for this part of the world. As well as the winds picking up, there's going to be plenty of rain around. That rain turning heavy at the moment across Scotland. A band of rain will whiz across England and Wales this evening, followed by some very lively showers when the winds will suddenly just whip up. So you may get woken up by the gusty winds tonight. Temperatures dropping down, but generally staying a few degrees above freezing, thanks mostly to the strength of the wind. That wind will be very lively then along some North Sea coasts in the morning, providing plenty of showers here as well. Some of those could be of hail, rain showers for Wales, southwest England, and the showers turning more and more wintry over northern Scotland as the day goes on. But there will be sunny spells, and there's going to be a cold feel to the day. Temperatures back to single figures, and add on that wind, it feels even colder. Certainly getting pretty cold on Wednesday evening, with further snow likely over northern Scotland, and then the potential through tomorrow evening for a mixture of rain, sleet and some snow to push south over southwest Scotland, northwest England into parts of Wales. So in this zone you may wake up to a covering on Thursday morning. The potential for things to turn icy as well, because as the winds ease, temperatures will drop further. So it's a cold start to Thursday. Could be some ice around and still some snow mixed in as this weather system trickles south across Wales into southwest England on Thursday morning. So again, may wake up to a covering in places here. Generally a fine sunny day on Thursday, but it will be cold, but those winds at least will be a little bit lighter.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News